Moya Ulight, Moya Upright. Welcome to Moya Podcast. Once again, we thank you for joining the movement and being part of us. As we promised yesterday, we have got the Sahel Thursdays, which are starting. Let me just put the other guest on. The Sahel
Okay.
Thursdays, which are have started that we're starting them today, and I know that a lot of us don't necessarily know what's happening in West Africa, especially as South Africans. We are very much involved in our own world, but we did see that there were coups in West Africa, and we were like, "Oh my God, what's that?" And we were like, "Oh, that looks nice." So I just thought we thought on Moya that we would start unpacking what's happening over there and how it affects us and perhaps inspires us. So we're going to start really at the beginning. I've got Mama Kanye and Good Oladele with us, who's going to help us unpack everything. We're going to start right from the beginning. What is Sahel region? What are the francophones? We were colonized by the English, so we have no
Yep.
concept of what the other colonization looks like, and some of what separates us as Africans is that some of us speak French, some of us speak English, and therefore we struggle to come together. So we just thought, let's create a platform where we can unpack what all of this is, who the West Africans are, what are these coups, what do they mean to us, is it democracy, and just the whole all the questions that we're busy asking ourselves. So I would like to greet Mama Kanye and put Oladele. Maybe Mama Kanye, since you're the elder, you can start first, and then I hand over to put Oladele.
Thank you, Tsiki, so much. Thank you for Umoya. We hope that Umoya grows and grows and grows because you bring legitimate topics to the platform. I greet the listeners. I almost said viewers. Some are listening, some are viewing. We don't take their time lightly. Some people have just come from work and haven't even had time to take off their work clothes. They just tuned in. We appreciate that. And we greet everyone, even beyond SA, those who've tuned in from neighboring countries and from East Africa. We are grateful. I will give over to my brother Oladele to greet. And then I think before he does that, maybe so that after him, Tsiki, you just read us there. I don't know if to call it famous or notorious quotation. But yeah, we are having this podcast precisely because of what you've said. We have no clue of what French colonization was. And oftentimes, as people of former British colonies, and Oladele is too, because he's Nigerian, we think of colonization in terms of what Britain did and did not do. So we are having to actually answer the golden question: were these coups necessary? So it's a three-part series, and it starts in the beginning, precisely for that. And thank you, Tsiki. Over to you, my brother.
Okay, my elder, greetings. Inziki, greetings, my sister. It's great to be on your channel. And I say greetings from Nigeria to everybody watching. My name, as you see, is Oladele Dosunmu. I'm the host on the Akeblan Awakening series. And what we do is basically similar. We go to where topics that people don't want to talk about. We cover all bases. We need to know why we're here, how we got here, and then seek solutions for the way forward. And this is one of the works, the challenges that we Africans don't want to confront. We don't want to do the work to confront the challenges that we encounter that's basically got us to where we are today. We struggle, and some of us run away from that work. We just sit comfortably in the hegemonic systems that continues to hurt us continuously. If we did not break away from the colonial systems, I'm saying it here and I say categorically, Africa will never be free. We can never use the same pain that they used to inflict on us to free ourselves. It's impossible. Consequently, we need to know how we got here. This is the reason why we're here today. We need to talk about the Francophone colonization. Basically, it's worse than the English colonization, but more or less the same. But the French is worse because they assimilate this kind of assimilation, which assimilates them into the system. It doesn't free them, so they still have loads of tentacles, holds them bound to the front to France. So that's why we're here today. We need to unpack this so people could actually get an understanding. So once you get an understanding, then you can know where do we go from there and how do we go forward. So once again, I say greetings.
Thank you so much. We are looking forward to the lesson. So let's start right there. What are the francophone countries? What does that mean? And when you say that the colonization is different, what do you also mean? So can we start unpacking that?
Okay.
I think,
When we talk about Franco, yeah, go on. You want to start?
no, can I just put a rider there, my brother?
Okay.
Colonization is bad in general, whether it was the Spanish, the German, the Portuguese, the Italian, or the English. But if an X was put on my head and I had to choose by force, I will never choose French colonization. It is by far the worst in comparison. And I think that's why we are having this series. So thank you, my brother, over to you.
Okay. Obviously, Onani, I was going to come onto this topic, so I was chatting with my sister. I woke up about 2 o'clock this morning, trying to figure out, just do some research on this. And then, like Inziki just asked her, what is Francophone Africa? What is it? What does it refer to? And what in the Francophone Africa, we have 29 countries. These include the 9 in West Africa, 12 in Central Africa, and we have 8 in North Africa. I'm just going to break them down so we know which countries we're referring to. So we have Algeria, Morocco, Tunisia, DRC, Rwanda, Burundi, Cameroon, Central African Republic, Republic of Congo, Gabon, Equatorial Guinea, Chad, Djibouti, Comoros, Cote d'Ivoire, Senegal, Mali, Burkina Faso, Niger, Benin, Togo, Guinea, and Gabon. The Sahel trio, obviously, that we're talking about today is Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger. They're kind of close together. So that's what forms the Francophone African countries. The challenges, let me start with this. In recent years, France has been handwriting its military presence in several countries in West Africa, including Mali, Burkina Faso, Niger, Senegal, and Cote d'Ivoire. This shift is part of a broader trend of African countries to seek assert their sovereignty. So basically, what you see with the Sahel region is they're trying to take themselves away from the control of the hegemonic powers. France remains important. Obviously, they still use French as a language. They still use the CFA franc. They still speak English. Basically, everything they do culturally is French. So that's basically what ties it. That basically, just like the English, that's what ties us together. Give me a second. Basically, at the moment, what holds them into it is the economic stranglehold, the CFA. That's basically what these 3 countries are trying to get away from. France holds basically them together in terms of, imagine this when I was researching this morning, I was looking at France determines the economic benefits or how they control their money. The reserves are based in Paris. So they determine the currency values for these countries. So when you say you're free, how can you have your reserves and your currencies held in a continent of your oppressors? Just think about that for a minute. So how can you free yourselves? How do you determine your own trajectory in terms of your economic policies? And the economic stranglehold is basically what's holding Africa captive, because basically they hold our money. They tell us that we owe them money. But Mama Khanyisile has talked about this in the past. It reportedly used to say that France takes about 500 billion euros out of those African countries annually. You're talking about 500 billion. Just think about that for a minute. And they tell you that these countries are poor. But France, their hegemonic power, are taking this money. Obviously, upon my research today, it's telling us this about 200 billion. But even that's still a lot of money. So I'm going to start with that one. I'll let my sister just chime in. But just to give you a context in terms of why do we need to get away, Anyway, I'll leave it there.
I think before I come in and just add to the description you've given of what are we talking about when we say francophone, a term I actually am very much opposed to because those are supposed to be independent African countries. Why they are called francophone Africa is just it's at another level. But I think before I add to your definition, our host, Mamia Nsigi, can you please read the quotation that I sent you and tell us who said those words?
Um, I'm not quite sure. Oh, I'm not able to because I'm using this phone for this.
Ah,
So
okay.
I don't have
So my
access to
brother,
it.
yes, okay.
Send it to me.
It, no, I have sent it to both of you. I think I will open it
Oh,
on my end as
give
I
me a
add
second.
to what you have said. Um, the big thing for me about Francophone Africa is that France only hosts a population of 6.8 million people, France herself, that is of 2024. But there are around 320 million speakers of French in the world. 61% of that is in Africa. We can go home right there.
Whoa.
Wow.
Wow.
No
Wow.
Africans who speak French, the
Wow.
French language and influence in the world shrinks like yesterday. That's why France is never going to leave Africa.
Wow.
When I was researching it to my brother, I came across very important things that at independence, France never withdrew her military forces from her colonies. I think before there, let's just correct one thing. While there are 29 of these countries that speak French, remember, not all of them are French colonies. I think 22 are. Remember, Belgians also colonized, and Belgians also speak French. So, Belgian
Yeah.
colonization also beefed up French speaking in this continent.
Yeah.
So, at independence, France never withdrew its military forces. The push to withdraw, as my brother said, only came a few years ago. But let's look at what is in these military bases and why are we so opposed to them. Let's look at France's military base in Djibouti, for instance. They have 5 naval and air bases in Djibouti, meaning what? Meaning, if people like Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger are telling France to get out, they don't need to load soldiers on a ship from France to go and fight and incite insurgents in those countries. They can just drive them across Djibouti. That's why you will not see photos being taken and you will not hear media saying France is still operating in the outskirts of these countries, fueling insurgency because they just do it on land. I mean, they already have 5 air and naval air bases in Djibouti. Why is Djibouti important? Djibouti is where the Red Sea meets the Gulf of Eden, connecting the Red Sea to the Indian Ocean. This is what it was called to the various researches that I looked at this afternoon. They say that Gulf is it is the vital artery for global trade. So it's not just a military base. Now, let's again look at other things that some people have said other than me and Oladele. There's a Professor Bruno Charbonnier of the Canada Royal Military College. He says France never left Africa. Instead, France negotiated sort of like contracts at independence with these countries that made France leave but not leave. It means on paper it looked like they were leaving, but they were not leaving because France put themselves in the center of the defense and security of these countries, the conflict resolution of these countries. France made herself to be able to mount rapid armed interventions across that region to project and protect its interests. We look at the base in Senegal, for instance. I wanted to fall off my chair as a former guerrilla and a retired Navy admiral. I wanted to fall off my chair. The base in Senegal is used to oversee training across 15 states of West Africa, that's ECOWAS, the
Wow.
economic bloc. It makes sense when Ibrahim Traore expelled the French, Niger, and Mali, especially Niger, where it is ECOWAS that threatened to invade them and said, you will return to democracy. It makes sense because all of this is coordinated from the military base in Senegal. There's another professor, Tony Schaefer of the University of Portsmouth, UK. He says France never exited Africa. He actually says, it is France's presence in Africa that gives France a latitude to even allow France to sit as a permanent member of the Security Council of the UN. France is taken serious because of this projection of strength. Because remember, I said it's only about 68 million people in France, people. So it is Africa that gives France this latitude and beefs her up. And I think for me, having listened to a bit of what Oladele has said, and remember, we are still on the first question, what is Francophone? This is neoliberalism 101, because neoliberalism is about forcing people culturally and economically to eat from your hand. So those military bases, France's military presence in Africa not having left, means it gave France the latitude to say who stays in power and who does not stay in power in these countries. In fact, there is somebody who has said it, Professor Bruno. No, I'm not looking for Professor Bruno. There's someone who has said it, who is in an institute somewhere in West Africa. I will find it. He says the president, he's a doctor, Bakhabi Samba, from the Timbuktu Institute. He says the presence of France there is to ensure and safeguard the perpetual stability of certain governments there who are agreeing with France and the instability of those who are in disagreement. And we can see in the Sahel that France has teamed up with Islamic militants to make sure that those governments do not prosper because they are not in agreement with France. It's also, for me, France's presence there, these military bases, make sure that France's foreign policy is carried out. Remember, all of the West, including America, the only thing they want from you is for you to agree to their foreign policy. If you contradict the foreign policy, that's when America sends its Marines. That's when they invade you like they did in Iraq. So France doesn't want to do that. They don't want to invade. They made sure at independence, we shall have our military present, so we don't even have to invade. We shall make sure through those bases that our foreign policy is agreed to. And in instances where you get clever blacks who don't agree to that, we shall just kill them like they did with Sankara. We shall speak to Blaise Kambori, the house nigger, and he shall be killed, and we shall okay the government that comes into power. Remember, those bases are also intelligence collection points. That's why these countries have never really moved since independence. They haven't developed. I think it's one step forward, two steps backward, because whatever they plan to do, it is being monitored on a daily basis. People, I don't know how to emphasize this more than I can. I understand it as a guerrilla, as a retired admiral. To have your enemy within you collecting intelligence against you 24/7, 365
Wow.
days a week means there's nothing you can plan. They even know who to get to. How did they know to get to Blaise Kambori? How did they know of all the people who surrounded Sankara, it is Blaise Kambori who will agree to kill him? How do they know these things? So these foreign bases, for me, when we say francophone, we really, this is what we mean. We mean Africa that's supposed to be free, that looks free, but it's actually not free. Because remember the strength of your currency, because we're a monetary based economy now under neoliberalism. The strength of the rand is in how much foreign reserves South Africa has. Understand that economists will break it down better. And I'm sure there are those who are in the show right now. They should type and expound on this. So if the foreign reserves of former French colonies are kept in Paris, whose currency are they beefing up? The French currency. And Nsigi, it defies logic for me how we have gone on in the AU as if this is not happening. All these former French colonies' money is called what? Central African franc. It's CAF.
It's
Central African
CFA. CFA.
what? CFA. Whatever
Yeah.
that CFA stands for, the people who have tuned in can
Yeah.
go and look at it. But literally, it means it's still the French franc, but the localized African one. It's still
Yeah.
the French franc, but it's a Senegalese one. It's still the French franc, but it's a Djibouti one. I mean, France never left, guys. That's just the conclusion of this introductory part of what is Francophone Africa. France never left because France cannot leave. Because if France leaves Africa, the language tumbles. 61% is here. So if they leave, the language tumbles. Their influence tumbles. So I think while I give to Oladele or back to you, Nsigi, I'm going to look for this quotation because it is a telling quotation. We are supposed to have started with it actually. I think we'll give
Is
it
that
back.
says is that the one that says running quotation slogan underwriting? Is it that one?
Yes,
We
yes,
bled for four and a half centuries.
yes,
Should I read
yes.
it?
So I'll get it. Yeah, you can read it. Read slowly, please, because
Okay.
it's so crucial.
Okay. We bled Africa for four and a half centuries. We looted their raw materials. Then we told lies that Africans are good for nothing. In the name of religion, we destroyed their cultures. And then, after being made rich at the expense, we now steal their brains through miseducation, misdirection, and misinformation, as well as propaganda to prevent them from enacting African retribution against us. This is Jacques Chirac, president of France between 1995 to 2007, and prime minister between 1974 to 1976. Yeah, and he hung around for a while till 1995 as a mayor of Paris. Let
So
that
I
sink
have
in.
a
I think Nsigi right there. Truly, we can go home. We bring it back to you.
Well, I was just thinking that for a lot of us, these are just words that we hear in the media. Maybe if you can break down for us, like you spoke about ECOWAS. What is ECOWAS? Can you break it down so that we understand it like we are in grade one? And then what is Sahel?
ECOWAS is just like for Southern Africans, SADC, the SADC, Southern African Community. Those are economic blocks. East Africa has a EAC, East African Community. West Africans have ECOWAS. So we call them sub-regional bodies in global politics because Africa is a region, as the Americas are a region, as Asia is a region. So the bodies within a continent are called sub-regional bodies. These are the sub-regional bodies through which we are represented in the AU. We are represented as countries directly, but also as sub-regional bodies. So ours is SADC. That's what ECOWAS is. Now, if 15 countries of the ECOWAS training is monitored and coordinated through the military base in Senegal, I mean, that's why I've always said, and people laugh at me. I say Belgium, the size of Soweto, will invade the African continent of 1.1 billion people and win that war. It might be a protracted war because we have numbers and they are small. But remember, this is no longer a war that relies on numbers primarily. War is high tech now. War is in the computer, war is drones. So yeah, that's what ECOWAS means. Um, the Sahel is a region that stretches really across east all the way to West Africa. And Burkina Faso, Niger, and Mali just happen to be part of the Sahel. It is a big region. And it's what Burkina Faso, Niger, and Mali have done to form themselves into a confederation of the three states, a confederation of Sahel states, CSS in English. That's what brought the term Sahel to the fore.
Thank
So
you. And then Abut Oladele, you've been doing some research on Sahel. So what did you learn? Especially, when you guys say that it's far better to be colonized by the British, even though no, there's no better colonization. But
there's no better.
yes. So why is the French one so evil?
Okay, I'm gonna go into the financial and economic implications
Yeah.
of these countries. Why it's so evil? We talked about the reserves being in France, yeah,
Wow.
but there's basically implications to that, with the loss of sovereignty.
Yeah.
Okay, limited control of your foreign exchange. Okay, having that in France, Paris, basically they control your foreign exchange and they manage it for you. So you have to depend on them for them to manage, which leads to loss of autonomy as well, and it reduces your ability to make economic decisions. That's how deep that is. You got economic costs. Okay, higher borrowing costs. Francophone countries may face higher borrowing costs due to the dependence on France for the foreign exchange management, because all that goes back to France, which limits the access to international capital markets. Okay, reduced economic growth. Yeah, the lack of control over your foreign exchange basically means it limits you to go, negotiate with particular people because France controls it. So if you want to go to Russia, you want to go to China, you haven't got the liberty to do that. So having the Sahel region take themselves away gives them the freedom. You can see what Mali's done. You can see what Niger's doing. You can see what Burkina Faso are doing in terms of the economic decisions they're making. It gives them the liberty to actually make decisions for themselves without worrying about Big Brother. Would I say Big Brother? No. What they're doing. I was just trying to watch my language. Inflation and currency volatility. Basically, it becomes unstable. Okay? The lack of control of your exchange, which they're managing, basically leads to inflation. Country may be forced to devalue the currency to maintain competitiveness. And whose competitiveness? It's not for their sake. Yeah? It creates volatility. The dependence on France's foreign exchange management leads to volatility. In French monetary policy can have a direct impact on the francophone. It basically has an impact on the currency, basically, and the value.
Yeah.
We've talked about this. The value of the currency is devalued. They determine, how high you can jump. And when they control your means to purchase and the means of the people in the country to purchase, it basically limits you. There's a limitation there. Another one here, it says limited access to international capital markets. Okay, lack of control, highest interest rates. It basically it stops you. And as we're going to keep talking, you can see, based on these things and looking what the Sahel region are doing right now, you can see the freedom they have in terms of them doing what they're doing. They've done in 2 or 3 years that these guys have been in power. You can see how leaps and bounds they've actually progressed. It tells you how they've underdeveloped these countries. Obviously, another one here is about opportunity cost, missed investment opportunities. The Francophone countries miss investments due to their dependence on the crown. We talked about that. Reduce economic diversification. So you can't diversify in terms of projects you want to do because they control you. We're talking about social and political implications as well. When your currency is unstable, it leads to unrest because the value of your currency, it depreciates. It doesn't carry weight. Social unrest in country. You see, I can say I'm in Nigeria right now, and it's when I'm talking about currency devaluation and the value for money and the market. I'll say it's bad. I've never seen Nigeria in the worst state that is right now economically. It's dire. So just think about that. You want to go to the market and basically your money doesn't go far. It's going to cause conflict. It's going to cause and these countries feed on conflicts within our region. Okay, my sister, she's a gorilla, she can tell you. But this is how these things start. So the summary there basically is the implication of the Francophone African countries' foreign reserves being kept in price are significant and far-reaching. The loss of sovereignty, economic cost, inflation, and currency volatility, limited access to international capital markets, opportunity cost, and social political implications also contribute to the challenge faced by Francophone countries in managing their economies effectively. I'll leave that there.
So you know
Yeah,
when I posted, oh, let me leave you. Yes, ma'am.
sorry. As he was speaking, I just remembered another stat I came across. Of the 10 most impoverished African countries, 6 are in the Francophone world.
Wow.
And then, yeah, of the top 10 African countries where girls least access education, 7 of them are in the Francophone world. I mean, somebody joked, and she will kill me if I say this because it's not a joke. She also never meant it as a joke. She was just trying to get my attention. That if we woke up tomorrow and West Africa is gone, have we ever thought how many negative statistics that put Africa as the top this and as the top this will go with West Africa? And in West Africa, I said yesterday, only Nigeria, Ghana, the Gambia were colonized not by France. He counted the list for us. Although it's 9 in the West, but most of those Central African states fall more or less with the West, although they are central in terms of geographic area. But I mean, France is governing them all as Francophone West Africa. So, Mzigi, honestly, I don't even know how to articulate this. I think for me, just the military presence alone should make you conclude that I don't want to be part of the Francophone world. How France has a cultural center. I don't know of a British cultural center in Africa where we send in South Africa or Nigeria or Ghana where we send people to be anglicized. French has got cultural centers. It's the first thing Sankara shut down. They have cultural centers in all these countries where they send young Africans to be Franconized, something like that, to perpetuate
Yeah.
and uphold French culture and the French language. I mean, I just.
Sis, that's what they call it, the assimilation process.
What are we even talking about? Because here is someone who was a French president, somebody who was a mayor, telling us that without Africa, France would never have survived. Mitterrand, I don't know how to even pronounce it, also one of their presidents, has said it. People must just go on Google and see what French politicians have said with their own mouths about how Africa keeps France afloat. Continues to. They have no intention to leave. Why would they leave? Africa
It's
is
so
the sugar
interesting.
daddy to France.
It's so interesting because when I posted that we're going to have this Sahel Thursday, somebody laughed and said, "Oh, please, they're so poor there," and it's so interesting
Oh.
because
Thank you.
they, yeah. So can we unpack that and how the wealth where it's going, and why our people are poor?
Okay, let me
Cool.
find. You want to go, sis, on that one? I've got a few things there actually. Okay, I'm gonna go with the Sahel trio. The Sahel trio are breaking France's stranglehold. Okay, they say we're poor, but okay, the Sahel trio have been working to diversify the economies and reduce its independence on France. And what have they done? They're working together trade in the trade wise. Let's include them. That includes what they've also doing actually is basically in talks with China and India. Okay, what are they unlocking? The natural resources, they've got uranium, they've got gold,
Mm,
they've got oil.
mm-hmm.
Uranium is the main one because that's the one that France don't want to let go with Niger.
Yes. Yeah, with Niger, yes.
Yeah, with Niger, uranium. So you can imagine if France is relying on Niger for uranium, do you want to tell me that that country is poor? Just recently, Burkina Faso just opened a gold mine. Yeah, they've just opened a gold mine. Do you want to tell me that a country that owns that kind of a gold mine, no European country has a gold mine.
Mm.
So you want to tell me that Burkina Faso is poor? Yeah? Mali, the same thing. They've just kicked out the Australians out of their country because these Australian countries refuse to pay taxes for taking the resources from their country. I don't know if it's Mali or Niger, but they paid them almost about $524 million in back taxes that they have never paid before. So you want to tell me that these countries are poor? That's just a few statistics there.
So it's important for us to involve what our guests and viewers are posting. Somebody from Malawi, Gloria, whom I met last week in Botswana, is saying France also had a cultural center in Malawi. Someone is saying they also have an alliance franchise in Deep Kloof extension in Soweto. I don't know how big it, I don't know how used. I've passed there several times and it was very rare for me to see the activity, but they are there, whether it's underused, but they are there. So France is not only doing this in her colonies, they are trying to encroach even to people who do not speak French that they never colonized. I was actually reading a statistic that according to France, they want by 2050 for the French language to be the most spoken in the world. So this is a cultural war. It is not a joke.
Yeah, you know what?
Now,
And sorry.
on what you asked, Nsigi, about the underdevelopment, the French, and this has been quantified by scholars. Remember, we had Portugal, they have 5, they have Mozambique, Angola, Cabo Verde, Guinea-Bissau, Sao Tome and Principe. So they have 2 countries and 3 islands. And then we had Spain, and then we had Germany, although the German ones were taken away after they caused the First World War, like Namibia. That's how they exterminated 80% of the Herero people there. And then we had the French, we had the English. So people have put this on a table and actually physically compared. I know colonization is bad in essence, but it's still important to see the evil and who was more evil. I know it's like comparing for people who are religious, who is the devil, the antichrist, and the false prophet. I mean, it is the same thing. Either as it may, this has been quantified. And France was found as a colonizer to have invested the least in infrastructure, in education, in healthcare. They have prioritized their interests over and above anybody else's. They've prioritized its neoliberalism. This they have all done, by the way. It's just that France has been so naked about it. The interests of their multinational cooperations. So don't mind the fact that these are military bases. Remember, they are also there to protect the multinational cooperations of France operating in those countries. They have had very little industrialization policy and implementation. France, in her colonies, created very weak governance
Yeah,
institutions. That's why
institutional
they've been
weaknesses.
so
Yeah, yeah.
prone to military coups, because the governments are so weak that the military as an institution is always stronger than government. And that's systemic because that's what France did. Also, France is training the militaries of these countries. They are not training the government and civil service. Remember that. France has created very little economic diversification in these colonies.
Yeah,
They have created your
yeah.
typical colonial economy where things leave the country to the mother country and the mother country imports. It is like that globally, but I mean, there is little diversification. In South Africa, though, BMW, we don't own it, it's German, but you can say, oh, there's a plant in Port Elizabeth where they assemble. France doesn't play that game. They don't play that game. They also have invested very little in terms of human development challenges. They have been by far found to be the lowest. Instead, France, because had a policy of assimilation, they encourage the brain drain. That's why
Brendan,
the
yeah.
first Africans to live in Europe has been Africans from French colonies. They have, on the contrary, instead of developing the human capacity, human development,
Capsicum.
in their colonies, they have encouraged the brain drain that if you're at a certain level of competence, just come to France, come make France better and not your own country. So I can go on and on and on, Nsigi, about the economy, but I mean,
Yeah.
I was watching a documentary with my husband and my daughter, I think about 5 years ago, on Guinea Conakry, and we were just shocked at how one ambulance is servicing, I think about four. We call them provinces. I don't remember what they call them, but it would be a province or states for Nigeria. Servicing about five of them. This ambulance breaks. It can't go through the mud. It's called for a pregnant woman at that time who is in labor, is going through mud, it's stuck, and then the driver must come out and fix the wires like we are stealing a car. You know how they steal cars when there are no keys. It's just I was watching this and I was thinking, for the life of me, these are the same people whose foreign reserves are in Paris, the same people who are paying civilization tax to France. What has France done to even deserve that civilization tax? And besides, who asked them for that civilization? Didn't they do this out of their own accord?
Yeah.
So yeah, I think, Nzigi, we'll leave it there. Remember, our overriding question, which we'll answer in part 3, listeners, is to say, was there any other way other than the coups in the Confederation of Sahel States, that is Niger, Mali, and Burkina Faso? Was there any other way to get these people to a revolution? Could it have been done in any other way other than the coups? Remembering the presence of French military bases there. So could it have been done in any other way? Although we'll answer it in part 2, I want this question to be running in the minds of our listeners.
You said something
Brilliant.
so interesting when you talk about the French cultural centers all
Mm,
over. Have the British not done the same in their school system? I mean, the mere fact that we speak English so eloquently is because we've been culturalized by the British. And those assemblies and chapels and Saint Mang and the Anglican Church,
mm.
um, aren't those the British cultural
Yeah.
centers?
Yeah. I
It
suppose.
is.
Yeah.
Yeah, it
Yeah. Go
is.
on.
I think
Go
that's
on.
why we say the colonization is the same. The difference with French cultural centers is that it is named that. It's
Yeah.
not something that's sneaked in through education, through the church. The French are primarily Catholic. It's not sneaked in through the back door. It
Yeah.
is sneaked in through the front door, through a
Yeah.
military
In your face.
presence. You do what I tell you, or I
Face.
invade you, or I kill your leader, and I install whoever I want to install. It is done through the front door, through a cultural center. They have what they call International Organization of French-Speaking Language, something like that, but it is in French, which is sponsored. And the current one, the last I checked, was an African woman who is the chairperson. They put us Africans there so that we ensure the perpetuation of the language. So while it is like that for the Portuguese, it is like that for all former colonies. I mean, what we read is mostly written in UK, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, and who's the other English speaking? But it is written there. What they read will mostly come from Belgium, from France. What they read mostly in the former Mozambican, former Portuguese colonies will largely come from Portugal. That one is because it's our fault. We haven't decolonized. So we don't want the Pan African education, which Nkrumah left for us. We are not implementing it. But for France, it is not even sneaking it through those institutions that we are talking about. It is just, if their presidents are talking about it, guys, if their presidents are giving us an evaluation of it, it means France is not hiding this, because France never for a second even thought that these countries will wake up one day and tell them to get out. They never even thought. That's how much they had this in the box. They were done.
So we were also, one of the questions was, what are the financial or economic implications of the reserves of these countries being held in France? What does that mean?
I think
Let me
Oladele
see.
did touch on it earlier, but I think
Yeah,
he can re-answer that.
unpack it
Okay.
nicely. Yeah.
Give
Yeah.
me a second. Under development. Give me 1 minute.
I
I'm
think
just
I think
searching.
while he looks at that, I did say to you earlier on, because we have been moved to a monetary system. Remember when money came into being, you South Africans that produce gold, or Ghanaians who are listening, and whoever else that produce gold, for Burkinabe people who've tuned in, because gold has been discovered. When the
Okay.
monetary system started, the gold standard was used, which means whoever produced the most gold would have been the richest country. Because if you say the rand is 15 rands to $1, it should be based on the gold standard of South Africa. How valuable is your gold? Is it first class gold? Is it second class gold? How tradable is it? The Americans were the first movers out of that when the multinational corporations took over their reserve bank and privatized it. Ours too is privatized, by the way, and privatized it. When they privatized that, they moved us away from the gold standard and they moved us to paper money. You know, banks create money from nothing. Economists will tell you
Yeah.
this.
Yep.
So the paper money is based now on what you have in your forex. We call it forex, the foreign reserves. So if your foreign reserves are not held in your country, that is why some of these former French colonies, when I go there, I can't count the money. I am always robbed unless I'm with the local, because you get a note, one note alone, which is 20,000 rands, one note of paper, 20,000. I'm just like, with 20,000, I can deposit a car, actually, a second-hand car, or even buy one, actually, if I'm buying it at an auction in South Africa. So it's very hard to calculate that money. And if you've got one note, that's 20,000. It means your 5 rand for us in terms of five does not work. It means your 10 rands is nothing. It's nothing. So the currencies are so devalued. And when your currency is that devalued, Nsiki, please understand, it's inflation. The poor becomes
Yeah.
poorer, the richer becomes richer. I think Oladele can tell us part of the research he has done. From the top of my head, that would just have been the answer that I give you.
Yeah, I've talked about these implications before, but like I said, the first one has loss of sovereignty. That's an economic implication. Loss of sovereignty. Basically, you have no control on the decisions you make in your country to control your trajectory. As all African countries are today, because we're pegged into these devalued currency, like my sister said, how do you build roads? How do you build hospitals? How do you build infrastructure bridges? Because don't forget, you need to get machines from their countries. Yeah, your currency has been devalued, so your money is not worth as much as theirs. And because we lack industrialization in Africa, so we have to so depend on them to buy the machineries, everything we need to build our economies. It could be agriculturally the same thing. We need to buy. We're trying to go into agriculture in Nigeria. My brother on the ground was saying, my brother, we need to get tractors from Europe. Okay, I have to buy those tractors in pounds. My naira is not worth much. So can you just imagine that? So how can you then develop yourselves when the currency is worth nothing? And these are the economic implications. You want to say something, sis?
Yeah, I was saying, how can you develop yourself? Also, when you are like that, you become a basket case, as they
Yeah, you become a
describe
beggar.
it. What do we mean when we say a country is a basket case? We mean it relies and solely relies on aid and borrowing money. That is increasing the
Yeah,
country's national debt, so that each year you pronounce a budget, you spend over 50% of that budget just servicing the national debt. But also remember, debt money is always ring fenced. There are things it will not do. It's so funny because you borrow it to develop, but you will see that the ring fencing mostly has to do with development itself. So why are you borrowing this money? You borrow it just to pay salaries of government. So that's what will happen, Tsidi, if your currency is this low. Let's talk a bit about the charity. It's the
oh
quickest example I want to make is US aid. US aid.
yeah,
The Americans call it USAID. Yeah, they like to call it things their own way. We call this thing USAID. We always know that international NGOs, we call them INGOs, are tied to a specific country. USAID is
Yes.
American, Action Aid is Danish, Oxfam is British. You have one something Stiftung, it's German. I mean, they're all here, these countries, under the guise of charity and helping. Let's look at the charity of USAID. The most biggest, actually, the general who's tuned in here, my friend Mongezi Kweta, can talk to us at length because he was the defense attaché in the US and learned about USAID. USAID, when Trump shut the tap and grounded them and told them, go to your room, like we tell our kids, and lock your room behind you. Who cried? Was it us who cried the loudest? The people to whom this charity was being given? No. Do you know where the loudest criers? The whole of southern states, I almost said South America, it gives a different connotation. The southern states of America, the plantations, the ones who didn't want to let the slaves go because that's where agriculture is. Why were they crying? Because the agricultural produce was stuck at the port. Remember, Trump didn't want anyone. He said, from now on, the tap is closed. Because that's government money, by the way. It's taxpayers' money. Their agricultural produce was stuck at the ports, coming where? To Africa. What does that mean for our local farmers? Which farmer can compete with subsidized USAID farming produce in Africa? So that charity, this thing of your foreign reserves being held there and you being reduced to a basket case, it opens up even for their NGOs. They are employed. USAID is the biggest INGO in the world. It employs Americans primarily because it's an American, although they will employ other people, but Americans are benefiting more out of it. The Danish people are benefiting more from Action Aid than any other people. This is a hoax. It's a hoax. The expats, they live like kings and queens in Africa. People who work for these INGOs live like kings and queens in this continent. It's taxpayers' money from back home. Why? Because our currencies are weak. But also remember, I'm going to be very controversial here and risk being thrown by tomatoes. Some of them are not NGOs, really. They are what one of our presidents said they are. Some of them, like the military bases, are nothing but intelligence operatives. They are here collecting data and intelligence for their countries back home in the name of charity. We wouldn't need them if our currencies were not this weak. So I think that answers your question, Zivi, of what does it do when your foreign reserves are held externally?
There's an interesting comment here from Fred who are saying we are told we need investors. China developed without investors. Investors is a new term for colonizer.
Of course, me, I'm not even there. I'm just saying thank you for the comment. I don't know if it's a brother or a sister or they, because some don't want to be reduced to gender. I put it to you that I'm even past China developed without investors. I am here. North Korea is not in the global world. Are they worried? Are they worried? They are not. They don't travel to our places. But these diseases that are killing us, are they killing them? Because we must also put on the table this thing called globalization, which is really a fancy concept. They now know that we know neocolonialism means a new form of colonization. So they came with the term globalization. It's still neoliberalism. It's still
Same thing.
neocolonialism. USAID is
Yep.
still doing global work. So no, that comment is spot on. We are conditioned, like these former French colonies were conditioned until in the recent years to say you shall not make it without France. You can't defend yourselves. You need the French military people there. You can't articulate your defense pact. France has to articulate it for you. You can't look after your your foreign reserves, your forex. France has to look after it for you. They were conditioned and they believed it, a lot of them. Although I doubt the citizens did, but the leaders did because the leaders were in the payroll of France, remember. Like many of our leaders are in the payroll of the former colonizer. So I agree fully with that comment. There's a lot of things we have been told that we need, that we do not need. And I'll tell you another one, a very controversial one. As a former guerrilla and as a retired admiral, another hoax we were sold, Africans, is that you don't need a strong defense force. You must concentrate on services, provide social services. Aha. When you don't have a strong defense force, they don't talk with you, they talk to you. When you don't have a strong defense force like India or North Korea, they can invade you at 10. It won't even cross their minds to invade you at 10 o'clock while you are having breakfast, and there is nothing you can do about it. So these hoax we were given also, there is no language. I put it to you. There's no language the West understands except the military language. Why do you think they spend so much on their military budgets? But they are telling you to spend less and less and less, concentrate on social services because they want you vacant and open for attack. So that, I mean, I can imagine the conversation they have with our leaders. I mean, as a former defense force person, I look at these defense forces and I'm just like, you just need a section of the Wagner group and it will take this whole defense force out. A section, we are talking about the defense force of a country. So why would I even be talking with you? I talk to you. Why do you think Trump is talking to Ukraine and not with Ukraine currently? Because the war that Ukraine is fighting with Russia is dependent on Europe and America. Without both of them, they cannot stand Russia. They can't. So it's another hoax we've been given. Why do you think India, despite the levels of poverty also being high and but India is a nuclear state, they realized it does not matter how much services we provide to our people. These people will tell us, we want you to devalue your money. Remember when because they reduce your to a basket case, when they give you aid and they borrow your money. I know people think that this is an overstatement. It is the truth. Research it. They tell you the rand is currently at 18 to a dollar. We want it at 24. If you are a country like some of these former French colonies where you have one note that's 20,000, what are you going to say? You will look at this as the president and
Yeah,
say, if I say no and I become arrogant, my people starve. When my people starve, they riot. When they riot, they want me out. So you are between a hammer and an anvil. What are you going to do? You're going to agree to the 24. Some of these currencies catapult in a week. It's
yeah.
moved like 10 places down, up in terms
It's
of
crazy.
inflation.
It's
It's
crazy.
crazy. So yeah, I think I'll leave this here.
So you spoke of the loss of sovereignty, right? And I want to now bring it to democracy. What is
Yeah,
democracy? And
I was
Oh,
waiting for that.
and why is it so important for our handlers that we are democratic states?
I think before I give it to my brother Oladele, let me just say I pressurized Ntsigi through Moya to really host this, and I am grateful to you, Ntsigi, for listening to the spirit because I asked you this yesterday. For people who do not believe, I asked you yesterday because I was hit by the reality that there are 54 African countries. There are three countries of the CSS, Confederation of Sahel States, Niger, Burkina Faso, and Mali, who are doing wonders in their countries. But 51 countries have not embraced them. The AU has not pronounced on them. ECOWAS threatened to invade them. Instead, we keep badgering them. I am not privy to this information, but I am dead sure that's what DECO would also be telling them, our Foreign Affairs Department. Return to democracy. Return. We can't engage you guys. Return to democracy. Everybody's telling them that. The West is telling them, return to democracy. We can't engage you. We don't encourage coups. We are military dictatorships. We don't want the military ruling. But guess what? The military is in charge in all Western countries. You know, America has been at war since 1946. This is the first time America is not running a war since 1946. And even that is not true because
not
America is
true.
still Syria, they are still active. Where else? In
Iran,
parts of Iraq.
Iran right now.
Yeah. So America has been at war since then. The budget of the American Defense Force sometimes is 10 times the budget of an African country, 20 times with some of them, 30 times with some of them. So honestly, Ntsiki, I think who really runs the world, democracy or the military? I'll let my brother unpack for us what is democracy.
Who runs the world is the industrial war complex of
Thank
the
you.
Western hegemonic powers. They want to run it, and it's business for them. Okay, I'm gonna go in with a conclusion. They say democracy is power to the people, by the people, for the people. That's the basic understanding of democracy. If that's the case, then we Africans should be able to actually be empowered. We should be, because I want to go to what Ubuntu means before I come to democracy. Ubuntu means I am because you are because I am. Okay? When you say power for the people, by the people, that's basically what Ubuntu means. So basically that's what it meant to be. Obviously, they give you the facade, they give you a name, democracy. But in that context, the conclusion that I've come to that I had here is, while democracy is often touted as a system where power is held by the people, in reality, the distribution of power can be more complex. The elites, special interests, media control, and systemic barriers can all limit the ability of citizens to participate in the democratic process and exert their influence over decisions made by elected officials. That's what they've given us, guys. So basically, you as Africans have no control. So we're pegged to the hegemonic interest, we're pegged to the elites, we're pegged to the corporations. So where does that leave us? They said it's power for the people, with the people, by the people. So where does the people fit in terms of what I've just described?
I think, sorry, my brother Oladele, I'm going to give it back to you. The nearest example of what you've just said. I'm told he's the richest African, or maybe the second richest. The last time I checked, it was Dos Santos's daughter, but I think those monies are being taken away. But someone is rich in Nigeria. What's his name? He's in the cement industry.
Aliko Dangote.
Dangote is the richest African currently. Am I correct?
Yeah.
Is he the
Yes,
richest
he is.
or among the richest?
Yes, he is. He is the richest African. Yeah, he is. Yeah.
Thank you. Now, when there's something crucial for the government to decide, and there is dissension, and the people want what Dangote does not want, who do you think the Nigerian government listens to?
They listen to Dangote.
Thank you. Because Dangote might even be funding some of those parties that are contesting.
Of
Remember,
course.
elections
Of
are a very
course.
expensive outfit. When we talk about democracy, I want to talk about elections at the end before we close, because democracy is based on elections. In South Africa, if there's a crucial thing and there's dissent, and Patrice has a voice on that, whose voice is going to be listened more to? Your voice, Ntsiki Mazwai, or Patrice's voice? Just play it out in your mind.
Definitely not my voice. It's got no money attached to it.
Thank you. So elitism runs democracy. Corporate, what we call MNCs, multinational corporations, run democracy. Why do you think in a African democratic government that fought against apartheid, that went to the bush, and that had the Freedom Charter, one of the clauses said there shall be peace and security? Why do you think a party like the ANC would have overseen the killing of 34 miners shot at their backs? Because that's what Lon Min wanted. And there's nothing the ANC could have done about it. Nothing. So military, multinationals, elitism run democracy. I'm bringing it back to you, my brother. Sorry for interrupting.
Yeah, they do. Okay. Like my sister said, the elites, they have the wealth. They basically wealth and privilege. It's with them. So like I said, they determine policies. I was having this conversation with my brother, and we're talking about lobbying. This is another corrupted term that they use in America. And I say to you, when they talk lobbying, it means corruption. It basically means paying your lawmakers to do the bidding. Someone like Dangote, like my sister said, would be funding parties. You know, the biggest example I can give was the former military dictator in Nigeria, Ibrahim Babangida, just launched a book.
And I was in Nigeria during that time, by the way.
Okay. He just launched a book. He just launched the book, my sister. And guess who was in attendance to launch this book? All the former military head of states were in the same room. And guess who else was there? All the billionaires were in the same room. They raised over, I don't know how much, but they raised about billions of naira in one day. And what were they doing? Payback to the people that given the chance to loot the country.
Yeah.
So when you're talking about
he is one, maybe I should say it as a non-Nigerian, he's one of the worst people to could have ruled Nigeria. I was sent there as part of the Umkhonto Wesizwe contingent when the ANC knew they were going to sell us out and negotiate. So they sent some of us who already had matric. I was a university dropout by then anyway. So they sent us to schools in Nigeria to, don't remember if it was 600 or 700. And I was in Kwara State University of Ilorin. I wrote to UCT. If there were already computers at this rate, I could have saved that letter. I literally was begging UCT to take me out of Nigeria. That's how I left Nigeria to go to UCT. Out of 2 years, we had attendance of lectures, if you put the days together, did not even amount to about 8 months of the 2 years. There were always strikes. There was no water. There was no electricity.
It's horrible.
Lecturers were not paid. There was no this. There was no this. This is the same person who is a hero now. And that's another thing. Elitism runs democracy. They decide who your heroes are.
Yeah.
They choose leaders for you. Which is why we ask the question, remember what we are talking about. Was there any other way for Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger to take the people to a revolution other than military coups? Through democracy, what would have happened? Although we are answering that in the last episode, through democracy, who would have been at the center of decision-making? France. Who would have had the money? French companies. Who would have had the military to suppress? France, because it's got its basis there. So, continue with democracy, my brother. Sorry, I interrupted.
And based on what you're saying, basically, with the so-called democracy, people, there's apathy. I'm looking, and I'm using that example, the area I'm in right now. There's apathy. People are poor. People are hungry. And guess what? They weaponize poverty to get people's attention. So when people are hungry, they haven't got no money. Come the election time, and you're talking about democracy, come election time, what do? They will give you 5,000, 10,000 naira. They will put it in bags and tell you to come and vote for them. So basically what you're doing is you're mortgaging your 5 years of your life to a system that has no intention of helping you. Is that supposed to be a system that the Sahel region needs to follow? Okay. You got the systemic barriers. We talked about lobbying. We talk about the laws, the voter ID. They put all these things in place basically to make it difficult for people to. In Nigeria, use an example, just to collect your voter's card becomes a problem. Just to collect a voter's card for you to go and vote. This is deliberate. Because like my sister said, they control the system. They know who they want to put there. So they're going to make everything for you to get to that ballot box hard. Because they know what, the democratic leaders, like my sister said, they are already selected. They know who's going to be there. So what they do is put a process in place. They put a process in place.
Yeah.
Yeah, go on.
No, we have 2 professors and a doctor who operate in the Sahel. One is local, one is English, one is Canadian, all agreeing on the same thing. The maintenance of the military presence in former French colonies by France was solely for one reason, to make sure that French interests are not contravened. And to make sure of that, you make sure that the leader who is at the helm is the leader that you have. You as France has signed off on. It's a leader that will not wake up like Captain Ibrahim Traore and say, get out. So you make sure that is a leader that knows that you are here to protect French interests. Are people going to vote? Of course they are going to vote. But this thing is engineered. We haven't even talked about the media and democracy, my brother Oladele. And Sigi knows this because she's in that space. The monopoly of foreign media globally, not just in Africa. Can we follow and say, okay, this is CNN, who owns CNN, who owns CNN? Just follow and see in the end how many of what we call media houses you come up with. I know, but I am not going to tell people because it's also important for us to let people do the homework. Find out, because that's why we call them multinational cooperations. Even media is run by multinational cooperations. It's a cartel. This cartel decides what you hear, when you hear it, how long it lasts as an item, what wording is chosen. Remember, before they invaded Iraq, we were told they demonized Saddam Hussein so much that when they invaded Iraq, even without the permission of the United Nations, we were all happy. It was just like, he's the dictator that must
Sorry,
come
Mom
down.
Kanye, sorry to disturb you there. Oladele, can you just mute your mic? Because we're getting a lot of
Okay.
feedback from that side, and
Oh,
it's still
yes.
sitting
Okay.
at Mama
Oh, okay.
Kanye.
Yes.
Thank
So
you.
by the
Yes.
time, thank you, Ntsiki. By the time they invaded and killed the sitting president, we were all happy because they demonized him so much in the media. He had become a thing of scorn. Same thing with Gaddafi, you know. So same thing with Patrice Lumumba. I am shocked to still meet Congolese, my brother Oladele, who tell me Patrice Lumumba is part of the problem because he did not agree to the incremental independence that Belgium was suggesting. They say we were not ready for independence. He rushed us. He should have listened to the Belgians and taken this thing in small doses until 20 years after, when Belgium is satisfied that we are now fully fledged girls and boys, we can govern a country. Because they demonized him in the media during the time. And these are the things the media was saying, foreign media. So this is the thing with elections, Nsigi. They give you, you think you are choosing. No, they give you the candidate because they demonize the one they don't like and they put on the pedestal the one they like. I think Trump really has, Trump is a disruptor. Truly has disrupted them, because no matter how much they came at him and demonized him, probably because he has money, which is another thing about democracy. You need to have money to enjoy democracy. If you don't have money, which is the majority of poor people, you're not going to enjoy democracy. Because if you are a candidate and you are being funded by US aid, when you take power, you are going to make sure that US aid is not disturbed in its operations in your country. If Caltex or Shell, which is owned by the Royal Dutch family, or British Petroleum, where also the royal family part of shares, if these companies, loan me, if they have funded your so-called election campaign, how then are you going to turn against them when you take power? Because they will go and scandalize you and say, don't see them talk revolution so much. We actually funded them. We, the multinational company, paid 80% of their election campaign. Which for me dies right there. This concept of democracy leading to freedom, or democracy being the best system, dies right there at the election process, which is what legitimizes democracy. How is an unfair, corrupt process legitimizing governance? Money flies in black bags during elections, guys. You pay this one to pay that one, and you pay. People change their language overnight. They were supporting Ntsigi because she's Pan-African, but Ntsigi is poor. Now Shell has flooded money, or Loan Mean, or Ashanti Gold, or whoever has flooded money because their candidate is Oladele, because they know Oladele is a house nigger. Suddenly, 3 days before the election, people's language has changed because people have been paid. And the majority of people who have no clue what is really going on. They just go with what the media is saying. Do you know how many people still have their taste being dictated by television? Many. Poor people. I love Bob Marley. Bob Marley says some people have hopes and dreams. Some people have means and ways. Nsiki, if you are a means and ways person, if you are struggling between one meal to the other, you don't have time to analyze, to criticize, to interrogate what the media tells you, you just run with it. You're too hungry to care. In fact, not even too hungry to care. That on its own is an insult. You care. You just don't have the time and the mental capacity to interrogate that, because the plate of food stands between you and yourself. And then, as my brother said, we use that poverty against them as insults. We issue them with t-shirts and food parcels and boxes of apples. In some countries, they're even issued with hard money in the hand. You get off at a bus stop with a bag full of money, and you give people wearing a t-shirt of your face and you say, vote for me. This is where we are. So what is democracy? Why are we badgering the 3 Sahel countries so much to return to democracy? Is it because they've cut out our corrupt masters, 51 countries of Africa who have not embraced them? Is it because they've cut out your corrupt funders and masters, and those masters are putting pressure on you not to embrace them? I think I'll leave it there.
Thank you. And I'll implore us to mute our mics when we're not speaking, so that we allow the speaker to land on their point. There has been a comment that, can the speakers allow each other to finish their points and land there? I suspect, Oladele, that was somebody defending you. So please, I hand the mic over to you and you can finish your point. I've asked Mamkai to close her mic.
Okay, I'm just going to pig into what somebody put a comment in the section there that's saying, well, they need voters. Yeah, they do need voters. Like my sister said, the sisters that you choose for has been chosen by a cartel. So you have a choice decided by a cartel. So in the hegemonic system, there's no loser, because basically every leader basically has been bought one way or the other. The Europeans never play to lose. So whoever you choose is going to do the bidding. You don't know it. You're busy killing yourself. You're busy fighting and dividing yourself along those political party lines. But know that whichever leader you get is already in their pockets. So, and this is basically the illusion of democracy. You go into the ballot box thinking, oh yeah, this person. But don't forget, those people, just look at where they came from. How did they select him? If it was a candidate that you've known through a community grassroots that's developed all the way through, then yeah, there will be some integrity in that candidate. But look at the candidates that they impose on you. Even during the primary electoral processes. In Nigeria, to choose a candidate, my sister, when Tinubu was about to go president, they had to run the primary. Tinubu basically bought, they had dollars flying in the stadium to choose a candidate. So he basically bought the whole candidate. The former vice president Ashibajo was in the running. He was I don't know what he got, but the votes he got was so measly that it was so embarrassing that a former vice president ran to become a president. So that tells you how corrupt the system is. So you could be so busy fighting, dividing yourselves along those lines, but just know that you're a pawn in the game. You're going out there to put those figures and do the boxes. Yeah, fair enough. You think you've participated, you've run the election. Yeah, I voted for my candidate. But don't forget, the candidates are guided by those they push towards you to vote for. I'm going to leave it there.
Mam Kanye, I know there's a comment you'd like to drop in. Do you want to unmute yourself and respond there?
No, I think he has actually said it all, Ntsiki. Money flies in black bags and in the boots of cars. People, we know this. We know it. We are not Yet there is South Africa, where people can be standing on a line and you pay them like it was flying in a stadium in Nigeria. We are not there. But if something is not overt, it does not mean it's not happening. We still bribe through chairpersons of branches. Why do you think political parties have got branches? The chairperson of a branch, because that is how candidates are endorsed, isn't it? So the chairperson of a branch is paid to make sure that the candidate they want from that branch is the one that emerges. The chairperson will pay 5 influential people in this branch who will override everybody else, no matter what their opinion is. And they will be so rascally about it too. They will threaten you and insult you. If you're a woman, they'll even call you a bitch. It's fair, because they want to shut you down because they've been paid. And then the candidate emerges. Was it democratic? The trail follows all the way to the province, to the national elections themselves within that party. By the time that party wins and gives you these candidates, how many of them really came through a legitimate process? Buying and selling. That's what democracy is. Democracy is capitalism. It is rooted in buying and selling because it is rooted in the monetary system. Because elections are expensive. Next to the defense force in a country, the next expensive thing is elections. Elections are not cheap. I think I'll leave it there.
Sure, that's so deep. So now, as we wrap up, I've got this question. So, if we move away from these democracies and all these names that they came with, and even the monetary system, what does that look like? Does it mean now? Because I think this is where the importance of the land comes in. Because really, what does a human being need to survive? They just need food and a roof over their heads. Basically, on Maslow's hierarchy, the bottom base. So does it mean that now we have to let go of our iPhones and our laptops and our TVs? What does it actually look like? What does it mean when we move away from these systems that came with white people?
You want to go first, Oladele?
Go first. Let me go first.
Okay.
What does it look like for me? As I'm in Nigeria today, and I look at the situation here, like my sister said, capitalism has been the root cause of Africa's problems. Capitalism, materialism. In Nigeria, we call it a better past my neighbor. People are aspiring to be better than the next door neighbor through capitalism. We've moved away from our community-based systems, which basically, if you look into history, we never lacked nothing. We had everything we needed, we nurtured nature, and we looked after nature. We lacked nothing. We were not materialistic, and we were fine, we lived fine. And we did not decimate the rivers, the waters, and everything was fine. The moment they introduced capitalism and religion into Africa, there a problem started. So, in 2025, how do we live? And this is one of the things that, and I discuss all the time, a lot of people are not ready to sacrifice because we're so indoctrinated into the system that they think that's the way forward. But a system that's killing your people, a system that's messing up your environment, a system that's basically messing up your agricultural systems. You're eating intoxicated food. You're using basically capitalism, breaking food into your system that's basically making you ill. Whereas you had land where you can actually grow food with no chemicals and you'll be healthy and you don't have to go to hospitals. So the question is, what sacrifice are you willing to make to get to where you need to get to away from where you are right now? And this is basically the biggest challenge, the biggest question that's facing Africa today. Because we're so brainwashed and we're so miseducated to think that capitalism and the Western way is the way forward. I was speaking to my cousin today and we were having discussions, and the things I was saying to him, it was just look at me, had no response, because I'm challenging. Everything that got you here so far has taken away from your heritage, your roots. For you, white is right. Who told you that white is right? When white came to Africa, Africa started being destroyed. So think of it for a minute. It's not easy. It's not easy. So many of us are so rooted into this that we cannot even think to take ourselves away from it. But decision has to be made individually and collectively to take us away from this. And as Africans, if we're gonna manifest and be, I call us our Keblan, mother of mankind, the system that's killed us, that's decimated us, is not the solution that's going to take us away from where we are. We need Ubuntu. That is our solution. I am because you are, because that means we need to stop being individualistic. Think about communal community projects. How do you work together? We've been the way we think, we basically so hate ourselves that we would rather go to the white man than go to a fellow African. We're so tolerant of the white man that we have no patience to deal with our own people. Who taught you to hate yourself? Think about it. So in going forward, it's the questions we guys need to ask yourselves. Their systems will never free you. You can have all these trinkets and mirrors, like I call them, fine. But as Africans, that's not us. It's not us. So how do you break your mindset to actually reset? And it's called indigenous knowledge system. It's lying dormant in every single one of us. It's just the fact that we've been so distracted that we can't seem to think and go through our spirit to look inwards to think this is the way forward. But the only way, my brothers and sisters watching Moya today, is self-love. Self-love. Materialism, consumerism, capitalism, all the isms are never, ever going to save Africa. And I'll leave it there.
I think, Nzigi, your question is a podcast on its own, because you are asking us and your viewers to look into pre-colonial Africa and see what can we learn from there. And from me, when I say pre-colonial Africa, I mean before 631 CE. We are in CE now, Common Era. Christians call it AD, Anno Domini, after Christ. So if you are in 2024 and I'm telling you to look before 639, I am actually asking you to look at over 1,600 years back. That's a lot of time. It's a lot of time. But I'm asking you not to stop there. I am asking you to look at what is called before the Common Era. By those of us who are not Christian, Christians say BC, before Christ. Look into that era, because already a place like Nubia, which is where Sudan, Juba is today, they owned the whole place, including the north, by the way. We know the people who live there came in 639, who live in North Sudan. Remember, they were already fully fledged by 12,000 BCE. Can you wrap your mind around that? 12,000 BCE, it was a countdown to 1. So for 12,000 years leading up to 1 BCE, Nubia exists. They are the longest, actually. I counted. They were around for 1,350 something years, because they went also over and they changed capitals 3 times. So when we are saying how else can we live, as long as our benchmark is when we got the so-called independence. If for Ghanaians the benchmark is 1957, and they are not asking what was Ghana before Ghana was Ghana, we are getting nowhere. What was South Africa before South Africa was South Africa? We are getting nowhere. That's the first thing. 2, what we are asking also speaks to a process we are refusing to embrace because our leaders don't want to. A process Nkrumah left for us called decolonization. Ghana themselves could Nkrumah. You know, I was flabbergasted when I discovered why Ghanaians took Nkrumah out. They said Nkrumah was more African than Ghanaian. I wash my hands. I mean, really. Nkrumah has left us so much. He's given us on science, on education, on the economy, on finance. He sat and wrote it down for us. We have implemented up to 3% only of what he told us. And that 3% is not even amongst Ghanaians. So when we are asking what then is the alternative, I just want to vomit, because the alternatives have been given to us. Sankara left us a heritage. Patrice Lumumba, Stephen Bantu Biko told us go cooperatives. A whole medical doctor refusing to wear a white coat and charge people and have a surgery in Apadi places, moves back to his hometown, opens a cooperative, teaches people health starts with gardening. People have told us how to live, Nzigi. It is not the focus of this podcast. You know, I talk a lot about the women who've lived and also left us legacies. We know how to live. We don't want to because capitalism is addictive. Can I tell you that? It is more addictive than the mother of all drugs, which is, what is it? It's not opium. It's not cocaine. What's the mother of all drugs? I don't know why I forget it. But capitalism is more addictive than the mother of all drugs. Capitalism wraps itself around you so tight. It's like an abusive relationship. You know that it's impoverishing you. You know that it's uprooting you. You know it's destroying you and your culture. But it is so addictive because you are happy to have that one day of drinking expensive whiskey on a Friday. So I saw someone else commented, Nyatue, also one of my many doctors. Thank you for tuning in, Nyatue. I think she's connecting from Malawi. She says poverty is weaponized. So when we say what's the alternative, let's de-weaponize poverty. Nsiki, I'm getting a lot on my WhatsApp on people who are saying, can we read that quotation again? And again, remind them who it is because they want to write down. Before they write it down, I think let's just say this is a quotation by Jacques Chirac, who was a president of France from 1995 to 2007, prime minister before that from 1974 to 76, and from 1986 to 88, and before that he was mayor of Paris from 1977 to 1995. What does he say? He says, we, talking about the French, maybe includes the West too. We bled Africa for 4.5 centuries. You know, there's 100 years in a century. So that's 450 years. We bled Africa for 4.5 centuries. We looted their raw minerals. Then we told lies that Africans are good for nothing. In the name of religion, we destroyed their cultures. And then after being made rich at their expense, we now steal their brains through miseducation, misdirection, and misinformation, as well as propaganda, to prevent them from enacting African retribution against us. Right there. This year, the AU has declared the year of reparations. What does a future away from neocolonialism and neoliberalism look like regarding reparations for us? Why aren't we demanding reparations? Why are Jews who know 5 million people were killed? You know, we don't know how much were killed in this continent. From the Arab slavery to their colonization to the Arabization and Islamization. We don't know how many died from 1400 onwards through the slave trade of the transatlantic, through their colonization, through the forced Christianization. We don't know how much people were stolen, were killed. It's almost always estimates it runs in hundreds of millions, but nothing paid in terms of reparations. How come? Because we cannot imagine anything outside of capitalism and aid and debt and foreign direct investment. These false macroeconomics that we send our children to university to learn, and midway all they wish for is to go and work for PricewaterhouseCoopers, KPMG, Ernst & Young, who are the others. We call them the 5 enablers. These 5 law and commercial companies that are helping multinationals to dodge and evade tax in Africa. So when you say, what else is the alternative? I'm drawn to a talk I gave to a university in Kenya, the University of Eldoret, about 3 weeks ago, I think. And the quotation that I opened with was by Ngugi wa Thiong'o. I always said T because for us Southern Africans, TH is T. Kenyans say no, wa Thiong'o, Ngugi wa Thiong'o. He says, our lives are a battlefield on which is fought a continuous war. He's talking about Africans. A continuous war between the forces that are pledged to confirm our humanity and those determined to dismantle it. Those who strive to build a protective wall around it and those who wish to pull it down. Those who wish to mold it and those who wish to break it. Those who aim to open our eyes and to make us see the light and look to tomorrow, and those who wish to lull us into closing our eyes. And I am adding to forever and vicious and perpetual enslavement. So asking what's the alternative? We are not saying go back and wear and walk half naked and da 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 da. That's not what we are advocating for, although that actually works in Africa. This country is too hot. I've never understood why some parliaments, Zimbabwe next door, insists on people wearing jacket and tie. I don't understand why in most African parliaments the African attire is regarded as informal attire. It does not enter parliament. I don't understand why in 53 African countries, African spirituality cannot officiate over the opening of parliament. It's only in South Africa, because African spirituality is nothing but a collection of demons and witchcraft. So, in asking where to from now, Nsiki, that's a podcast on its own. Let's not, because you see, it sidetracks us from concentrating on the Sahel. I think maybe post the Sahel, we said we want to do DRC. Maybe we concentrate on what does the alternative of neoliberalism and neocolonialism look like for Africans. But the Sahel is already charting it, actually. They are charting it. So I think I'll leave it there also.
Thank you. I've put the quote on the screen now from the Emerging Al-Kabilan. That is Oladele's YouTube channel. So please do go subscribe to that channel too, because we are all family. Thank you so much to everybody who joined today. We were just laying the foundation for the Francophones, Guti, what it is, who are they. Next week, we're just going to go into the 3 countries now and break down all the political leaders there. And Abu Sankara, we're going to talk about Blaisang, compare. So we go deeper into it. Mam Kangi, the reason I was saying where to from now was because we have to unpack, Guti, when we're saying democracy or these systems that we want to get rid of, what does it mean? Like, how do we expand our minds, Guti? You know? So, yes, so see everybody next week. Also, I wanted to check with the audience if this time works. 6 p.m. might be a time when people are actually still driving home. So I would love some feedback to find out if this time works for the audience, or if they need it to be a bit later after they put the children to sleep, maybe at 8 p.m. So please do give us feedback, because we do want maximum engagement on these talks, because we are trying to get North, South, East, West Africa all together, because there was divide and conquer. And because we know there was divide and conquer, it means now it's time for us to unite and break down these barriers, break down the French, break down the English, and actually also figure out what language we're going to speak. So thank you so much, Mama Kanyi, put Oladele. Thank you so much for your time. Remember to like, share, and subscribe, guys. Umoya Ulight, Umoya Upright. We are signing out. Thank you so much for joining